This week on the Capitol Cable, Joseph Bermudez of CSIS, deep expert in defense and intelligence matters vis-a-vis North Korea and the North Korean military. Lessons learned, ongoing activities, all about Ukraine. That and much more next on the 111th installment of the CSIS Capitol Cable. Coming your way. Good morning to those of you in Washington, D.C. Good evening to those of you in South Korea. Good day to those of you around the world. Welcome to the 111th installment of the CSIS Capitol Cable. I'm Mark Lippert, your host and moderator. This week on the Capitol Cable, North Korean military capabilities, defense issues, vis-a-vis the context, as it were, the Ukraine war. And with us, perfectly positioned, CSIS's own gem, Joseph Bermudez, who is a long-standing expert in North Korean defense and intelligence matters, as well as ballistic missile production around the world, or development, rather, around the world. And so welcome to the show, Mr. Bermudez.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
All right, and I have to brag a little bit about your bio. It's great. I just want to encourage folks to look it up online. 4 books published, if I'm correct. You also have a long history of working in the imagery intelligence open source / world. Right, that's a mouthful. And of course, prolific lecturer. You're in high demand. We're lucky to get you today. FBI, Los Alamos Labs, Stanford University, Marine Corps, Columbia University, Office of Naval Intelligence, just to name a few. I also put the Congress in there as well. So, yes. Joe, we're lucky to have you, and welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
All right, excellent. We've got a speed round today because it's just you and me. Victor's off, I think, gallivanting through Europe or it's just, I know what I want to do when I retire. Become Victor Cha.
Victor Cha. Yes.
so maybe if you and I could get right into this deadly serious, really topical, especially given all the political machinations around the Russia-Ukraine conflict with the peace agreement, all that. There is this central question for those of us who follow the peninsula, which is North Korean activities, performance, and that's where you are really well suited to answer. And so, Joe, if I could just start with a broad strokes question. You know, we've had North Korean troops in the theater for a while now. We've had a whole slew of open source reporting on it. I know the U.S. intelligence community has been collecting on it. What are you seeing from your vantage point, from your expertise, that you can convey to viewers? And Joe, again, welcome back to the show, and thanks again for being here.
Oh, thank you. Broad stroke is that North Korean-Russian cooperation, military sphere, and that includes troops, weapons, technology exchange, has been ongoing and is likely increasing. And it's making a difference in North Korea and Korea People's Army and Koreans' weapon development.
And Joe, then let's back up then. I know that speaking with you informally, I think you've come to the conclusion that early on you saw poor performance out of the North Korean military upon deployment in the theater. Can you walk our viewers through that issue? And what did you see during that, I guess, first phase of North Korean deployment?
Sure. North Korea began submitting combat troops, I should say, to Russia. They went through an initial training phase within Russia. It wasn't extensive. And then they were deployed on the Ukraine front. We saw the initial combat operations. The North Koreans did poorly. And the primary reason, while people come with all these ideas and concepts and make judgments both for and against, it's simple that they were green troops. They hadn't been in combat before. Whenever you send fresh troops into combat, it takes a period of adjustment. You typically suffer a higher level of casualties. You do things the way you were trained. You fight the way you trained, and then you develop an understanding of what the current conditions you're fighting in are. So North Korean troops are trained to fight on the Korean Peninsula, which it tends to be mountainous for the most part. Yeah, there are some plains and flatlands on the West Coast primarily, but they're trained to fight in rugged terrain. The terrain that they were employed in was relatively flat. It was the steppes of Russia and Ukraine. If anybody has an idea of World War II, this is where the large tank battles. In fact, the largest tank battle in history took place at Kursk, where the North Korean troops are currently deployed. So this is a different type of terrain. Additionally, they're fighting against an opponent, the Ukrainian army, that is well trained, well experienced. I mean, it's been what, 10 years since the war started, and these troops are fighting for their homes and their families. That's a tough combination to fight against. The other thing I would point out is that the front has, for the most part, become static, somewhat static, and there are extensive trenches and multiple defensive zones, and the North Koreans just aren't trained for that. Okay? They're also trained to fight in a certain style, certain operational tempo, and they haven't been able to do that completely because of the nature of the fighting on the Russian front. I mean, the Ukraine front, sorry. But however, they've been in combat roughly 6 months. They've learned, and most people think, it's easy to be a combat soldier. It really isn't. It takes a lot of training. It takes a lot of skills that most people don't have. And if you survive, you get better. Because if you didn't survive, you'd be dead. And this is a natural turn of events, and the troops are improving. Their tactics have improved. Simple things like how many and what size units you put along the kilometer of front, how you do movement, fire movement, one part of your unit fires while the other moves forward, then you switch the role and you move forward. These things have improved. They've also learned to operate in an environment that has numerous small uncrewed aerial vehicles, UAVs. This is something that they haven't really trained with. The other thing is the high rate of munitions expenditure. In training, you only fire a small amount of rounds because everybody's trying to conserve, ammunition. But now that they're in combat, the quantity of munitions that they expend is much higher than they're used to. And this involves logistics, getting them the munitions they need. It's a logistics problem. While primarily this is a Russian responsibility, there is at the lower level North Korean responsibility. I think it was General Omar Bradley, a U.S. general, World War II, said amateurs talk strategy, professionals talk logistics. And it's so true.
That's true. My quote on that is Napoleon: "An army marches on its stomach."
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah, no, well put, Joe. All right, so let me dig in a little bit more on this. Maybe just a macro question,
Mm-hmm.
and then some I would say some follow-ups. It does sound, and this is for those of us who I would say follow North Korean military, the military doctrine and developments, but aren't deep experts like you. It sounds like there's pliability and adaptability built into their system, or at least there is some learning going on. Can you walk us through that element in a system that I think many outsiders observe as rigid, a heavily conscripted army, dug
Mm-hmm.
in on, I guess I would say decades old doctrine and training
Mm-hmm.
training platforms. Walk us through that issue. That's of interest, I think, to some of our viewers here today.
There are a lot of things in that question. I'll just touch upon a few. North Korean troops are incredibly well disciplined. They, the training system is long, it is hard, uh, it's sometimes brutal. Corporal punishment of troops is something normal in North Korea. Uh, in fact, it's something that troops in other armies around the world would probably revolt if subject to. They are constantly inoculated with the ethos of attack. Despite losses, keep going forward. This is very, very important. There's a concept that they're taught, and propaganda constantly repeats to them. One is worth 100. So each troop, because they are superior training, their moral, development, their political development, they are worth, each one of them is worth 100 troops. Well, in initial combat operations, that didn't prove to be true. So that affected morale and, somewhat tactics, obviously. And they've adapted, which is important. You either adapt or die on the battlefield. Now, the question is will these people who are experienced with combat and the lessons they've learned, how well will those be transmitted up the line to the general staff level? There's a component of the North Korean General Staff called the Military Training Bureau, sometimes called the Combat Training Bureau. They're responsible for education and training. It conducts research and analysis of foreign combat operations through its own set of research institutes and think tanks. This is very common. It would be somewhat analogous to the U.S. Army's TRADOC, Training and Doctrine Command. And this information is brought in and it goes to, for example, the Research Institute for Military Sciences or the Strategy Research Institute. These two and several other small institutes get together with the Operations Bureau. They establish requirements and curricula for military academies and schools. And they also establish yearly training requirements and schedules for the Korean People's Army and all the paramilitary units in North Korea. Now, where these lessons learned are in that process, we don't know. And part of this process is heavily influenced by the Korean Workers' Party, the political aspects. What does Kim Jong-un and the Korean Workers' Party believe is important? And this can totally distort lessons learned, but it also works for them. They've been doing lessons learned, and if you go back, you can see from the 1960s, for example, the 1967 war between Egypt and Israel and Syria and Jordan, they took many lessons. They had advisors or sometimes troops in these countries. And it's been this way over the years. They've studied every major military conflict in the world. They've drawn lessons. These lessons have affected doctrine, strategy, and obviously tactical operations. So this is a process that works. Sometimes it's distorted, like I said. But when you speak with defectors and escapees, they explain how certain things have changed in the Korean People's Army because of these lessons learned. It's a process. It's slow, just like any other military around the world. It's a bureaucratic system. And on top of that, it's, an authoritarian system. It's a real challenge for them, but it does work.
All right, outstanding. Let me go small, then back to big.
Sure.
Because this is excellent. I'm going to backtrack slightly,
Mm-hmm.
and then we'll bring the threads together. In their improvement on the battlefield that you have seen, you've touched on this. I just want to bring this out a little more and underscore it. Where have you seen the big improvements? Is it in C2? Is it in equipment? Is it in their ability to effectuate combined arms? Is it in you mentioned op tempo, right? Is it in sort of where are you seeing those improvements the most? And then I want to tie this back to the peninsula and bring some lessons learned, get you out of your comfort zone, make you speculate a bit. So there you go.
I would say command and control, C2, has improved. A
You could
realistic.
tell I'm dating myself now. It's like C17 ISR, anyway, so I'm going back to the good old days of just C2. So keep going. Sorry.
Command and control has improved. The quality of the uh, leadership, junior leadership, it's true around the world that sergeants and ensigns actually run the military. Okay. They prevent lieutenants, and junior officers from making lots of mistakes. Well, the same is true in the Korean Army, Korean People's Army. And this has improved. And we see this as a result of how they move and operate in combat. Coordination has improved. Simple things, and as I mentioned previously, how dense are your troops? How many troops do you put per kilometer? The size of the unit per kilometer? These are practical issues. This is where they've improved. They've also come to an understanding of UAV operations, especially Ukrainian small UAVs, suicide UAVs. This has given them a good deal of experience. They've also learned to operate under an electronic warfare intense environment with lots of jamming, spoofing, things like this that makes it hard to coordinate. And they've learned to work through some of the hiccups you have when you're operating in an environment like that.
All right, let me just go one more small and then back to the peninsula. What about interoperability? Are they out there kind of on their own as a North Korean unit effectuating combat or undertaking combat operations? Or are they increasingly interoperable with, say, Russian troops and or other friendly elements on the battlefield? What lessons are they learning in terms of interoperability?
Yeah, this is tough. When we talk about interoperability in the United States or NATO, we're literally talking interoperability. You could bring a German tank company, put it next to a British tank company, next to an American tank company, and have a French, colonel lead them in combat, and they would work pretty well because of the same equipment, same tactics, same doctrine, same language, not technical language. I'm talking about, military languages. So they would work very well. It doesn't appear that the North Koreans are actually doing that with Russian troops. They're in the same operations as some Russian troops, and Russia at the higher level designates and controls them. But when you get down to the tactical level, you have apparently advisors, a Russian advisor with a battalion or something of that nature. I should point out that many North Koreans are taught Russian in school. So it's a lot of troops have some familiarity with the Russian language, which helps tremendously. But it seems at the tactical level, the lower level, the North Koreans are by themselves with some Russian advisors helping to coordinate, but they're not truly interoperable.
Okay, got it. Very, very helpful there. I mean, it's interesting, and this brings me back to the peninsulas because, look, I'm stating the obvious here. It's what the U.S. and the South Korean forces spend a lot of time on, right? Interoperability, the ability to effectuate joint combined arms. I mean, it's integral to the defense of the Korean Peninsula. So let's get to that. Let's get to that. Lessons learned. I know this is hard to speculate because you just mentioned that it's got to go through this very interesting, the lessons learned from the battlefield, let me start over, from Ukraine have got to go through an intensive, evaluation and validation process within the North Korean system that you really outlined very well for the viewers. Talk to us, though, what you think might come out on the other end in terms of applicability for the Korean Peninsula and the balance of military power there.
If all quote unquote goes well for North Korea and in the integration of lessons learned, we'll likely see and this will take years because training cycles go yearly or bi-yearly. So it'll take some time. You'll see a better trained, more realistically trained Korean People's Army, one that has some knowledge of modern warfare. They'll also have likely higher quantities of munitions readily available because of the higher rate that combat incurs on troops, and because they would be conducting an assault operation. The weapons themselves and the munitions themselves will probably have a higher level of quality control. You know, a lot of times when you look at North Korean weapons that have been shipped around the world, the quality isn't that good. Simple as that. Well, quality control at the factories has improved dramatically, and that's with information acquired during operations in Russia. And that affects everything downstream. We'll also expect to see a greater use of small UAVs by the Korean People's Army. And I should point out, North Korea has been involved in some level of UAV activity since the late 70s. You know, so they're not strangers to it. It's just that during the past, say, 10 years, and specifically in the past years, 5 years, they have understood the importance of it on the modern battlefield and have started to produce a wider range and increased quantity of small UAVs. And these are for strategic reconnaissance, tactical reconnaissance, attack operations, things of that nature. The other thing we might see is improvements in the nature of training operations, that they'd be more realistic. You know, in North Korea, the military, when they conduct an operation, even if it's supposedly like, supposed to be realistic, they always succeed, right?
Mm-hmm.
You learn your lesson when you don't succeed and why you don't succeed. We'll probably see some more of that, more realistic training. You know, and this could help with things as, you know, as odd as river crossing operations. The Russians did very poorly during the initial invasion of Ukraine. Well, the North Korean have large river crossing engineering units, and they probably learned a lot from that.
Very interesting. Okay, final two questions here for you, and I'm stretching you in terms of your comfort zone, I know, but let me ask this. Given what you've seen in Ukraine from the North Korean military contingent there, given what you have discussed here in terms of lessons learned and the possibility of, I guess you would say, improvements to the North in terms of their military posture on the peninsula, what should the U.S. military thinkers and the South Korean military thinkers, in no particular order, there could be the South Koreans first, be thinking or doing or potentially responding to in terms of these, I guess, enhanced capabilities, for lack of a better term, from the North Korean military coming out of the Ukraine conflict?
An excellent question. We know that South Korean and U.S. forces, combined field forces, constantly update their training for what they see happening with North Korea. This has to continue. Hopefully it will at a very open and practical level, and I think it will. Things they'll obviously be paying attention to are the use of UAVs, electronic warfare. You know, North Koreans are producing additional electronic warfare equipment. We see the heavy reliance by U.S., South Korean, and other troops around the world upon GPS-guided munitions. So we should expect to see North Korean GPS jamming capabilities increase. Most Western militaries tend to rely heavily upon radio, very heavily upon radios. So jamming of those radios, barrage jamming, even if you're using frequency skipping radios, barrage jamming can affect that. Things of that nature, the technical things. We should also expect to see, if combat operations continue, because there's only an armistice, not a ceasefire, we should expect to see, if there are ever any combat relations, a higher intensity of artillery use and the use of rockets and missiles to attack the operational and strategic areas to cause chaos and confusion. We also should expect to see heavy use of special operations forces, North Korean special operations forces.
Excellent. All right, outstanding. Okay, so let me bring this all together in kind of a net. If you were sitting, at an IC desk asking for your bottom line assessment, the question that I have is, on balance, is the North Korean military, putting aside the political and the policy piece, the military has this, if it were to end today, has this been a net benefit to the North Korean military in terms of its combat efficacy and potential combat operations on the Korean Peninsula?
An excellent question. It is at the beginning stages of that. Okay? How well and how widespread will that improvement be is yet to be determined. Just, simply the improvement in quality of ammunition is a significant improvement. Troops around the world talk to each other, right? And that goes up and down regardless of whether the chain of command likes it. So some of this information is getting back to Korean units somehow, whether it's accurate or distorted, we don't know yet. But so they understand something's happening, something's changing. They understand from the increased presence of UAVs at, division level means that something's changing. So yes, the efficacy of the Korean People's Army is likely to improve over the coming years. The depth of that we have yet to see.
All right, outstanding. All right, we are going to leave it there. We did our speed round, 30 minutes. Joseph Bermudez, thank you so much for just a tour de force, outstanding analysis. And I guess what I would say is also please check out his fantastic work on the CSIS website, right? Every time you post, I think several international news outlets get interested. Your batting average is quite high, to use a baseball analogy. But again, really appreciate the time here today. 30 minutes of distilled, tight analysis on a subject that is of great interest, but we probably, frankly, don't cover enough on this program. So again, thanks again.
You're most welcome.
Have a great weekend. Last word to you, Joe.
A quick plug. Myself, Jennifer Jun, and Victor Cha have a book coming out, I believe, in May. That is on North Korea's development of ballistic missile submarines.
Oh, outstanding. All right, we'll be on the lookout for that. We will promote that on this show. And I myself am going to get an advance copy because as a former Navy officer, I'm acutely interested in this. So outstanding. All right, thanks, Joe. Thanks again. See everybody in a couple of weeks.
Have a great day. Bye.